At the end of the day, if you can't be accountable, you're not going to be able to grow.
There's like an inherent desire to always want to be part of the crowd.
It became less about like getting to know a girl and more so about being like, can I get this girl to have feelings for me?
Podcast 15, we have our third guest. Math is not our thing. That's why we do a podcast. So our guest here today is Mr. David Beatty. He is a type 1 diabetic. He's the middle child of a family of 10 and actually the brother of co-host Ben.
Also has blue eyes.
He does have blue eyes.
I'm very Irish.
If we're just going to list like a portfolio / resume of David. Yeah.
I did a quick Wikipedia search and that's all I found. The first one was the medical history.
Also,
you could add that about 3 hours ago I had a mustache.
He did have a mustache.
He used to have a mustache,
but he
no
does
longer.
Not. He does not anymore. And so, David, everyone's going to be wondering right now, what happened to your arm?
Yeah. So exactly a week ago today, actually, I was playing. I'm a very avid soccer player. During the summer, I was playing twice a week, just like rec leagues. But I play a lot of soccer. It's by far my favorite sport. I was on a fast break, and this dude lifted my arm up and just plowed through me. So I go down, I hit the ground, and I hear like just a popping noise. And I immediately was like, oh no. And I can feel my shoulder is just like not in place. And so I'm like moving my arm around like a madman, like go back into place, pop back into place, pop back into place. I stand up and my arm is just like limp gorilla hanging down all the way to my knee, and my collarbone is sticking up like a ½ inch. And I'm like, oh no, this sucks. And so I rushed to the ER, and I tore a ligament. It's called an AC separation.
Mm-hmm.
Your clavicle is held to your acromion, which is a part of your shoulder blade, the upper part. It's held together by a tiny little tendon, and I just partially tore that thing. So, I'm probably going to be in, luckily no surgery. It's only a first-degree tear. But I'm going to be in recovery for, probably a couple months. So
that's
tough.
Super unfortunate. Shoulder injuries, injuries in general, are just never fun.
Yeah. Luckily you don't use your arm for soccer.
Yeah. But, running.
Get it back on the field.
Rub some dirt on it, wrap it up, you're fine. Right? That's what you did.
Duct tape.
I actually did grab a clump of turf and I just started rubbing it around on my shoulder like a madman. Yeah.
See, if you're playing on an actual field, you probably would have been fine because it would have been dirt. But it being turf,
that's why he actually got injured.
My
what
dad
actually legitimized like the injury was the fact that it was turf.
Yeah. Really, honestly, I feel like the friction that rubber causes probably just grabbed the tendon, kind of like just grabbed it and pulled it.
Yeah, probably made it worse. And so you mentioned soccer's your favorite sport. How long have you been playing soccer?
I have been playing soccer. I've been playing my whole life. I think that it really started with like the 2014 World Cup. I think was a really big deal. Down where I lived, Northern Virginia, a lot of my friends, we all followed it. And we used to play football at like a homeschool co-op that we did. We would play football at the end of the day. And then the year of the World Cup, that just changed. We just started playing World Cup every single Thursday.
The whole homeschool group
massive.
Yeah, you'd
like
have games
60
of World Cup.
kids.
Yeah, that had like 50 to 60 kids in one game.
That's
It was
super
pretty nuts.
cool that event can go from American football to we're playing soccer now.
Yeah.
Pretty
So
much.
I was playing, just like street soccer with friends from that point onwards, and basketball was kind of my main thing for like 7th grade to like my freshman year of high school. But my sophomore year of high school, I tried out for like the local high school team, made it onto the team, and from then it's basically just been a big passion of mine. It's really the only sport that I play now.
So you're graduated from high school and you're playing with friends now. Where'd you kind of fall into this group?
Yeah, so actually the way that it happened, I had been playing with friends, I would say from like 18 and 19, just for a year. I was able to kind of like field a team with buddies. But people moving away, going to college, that kind of thing, everyone got kind of busy and that team separated. I also started working a lot more, and what happened was the place where I play, there's just like a form online you can fill out, like an actual form, like a free agent form, so to speak. And I got a text probably 2.5 months after I filled out that form. I forgot about it, to be honest. And I randomly got a text and they were like, hey, we have an opening on a team. If you want to play, just let us know. And I was like, oh yeah, for sure. So that was back in March, and I have been playing with those guys since March.
And that's what ultimately led to you getting injured.
Yeah, literally. Filling out one form on the internet a year ago ultimately led to a torn shoulder.
I think it's really interesting. One of the really cool things I love about sports, especially soccer, is it's one of those like really big team-oriented sports. I think there's a lot of stuff that you can learn from just like soccer, basketball, football. What has been your experience with playing? Because you've played a lot of sports. You've been playing sports really your entire life. I know because I've seen it. I taught you a lot of those sports. What do you think are some of the most important aspects from sports you've learned?
Ooh, I would say a really big thing that I've had to take away from sports has been not even necessarily the art of winning, but the art of losing gracefully, and not always being mad with the fact that things don't quite go your way. Because, like just a really big life lesson that I think you can grasp from any sport really is that ultimately you can do your best, but you still might not get the result that you like. So you have to be able to kind of take that in stride and lose gracefully, not be upset, because if you did what you had to do and it just wasn't enough, you can't be upset because you still gave your all. So I would say the art of losing gracefully. And then secondly, I would add to that, just being part of like a machine, being the piece in the machine that you need to be, because obviously in a team sport, it's not going to be all about your independent performance. It's going to be about how well you can mesh and kind of flow with the people around you. So I think being a part of a machine, a small piece that makes all the cogs spin, I think that's a huge part too.
Yeah, 100%. It definitely is, and it's a team sport. So you're with your teammates all the time. You said a lot of them are your friends. How much time outside of the soccer field do you spend with these people? Are you growing those relationships outside of the field, or is it just when you guys are playing?
These guys are people who I only met, playing soccer. So they definitely have, like they've invited me to stuff. And really, I spend a lot of time with like a very select group of people. I don't really like stray from my flock, so to speak. So these are mostly just like people that I do the sport with. I don't really spend too much time with them outside of the field. I did put together my own team, and the team that I just put together is a lot more friends, and even like Ben's on the team, so it's a little bit of family.
Yeah.
And that team, I spend a lot of time with those guys. But I think that the team chemistry doesn't even necessarily come from the amount of time you spend off the field. It really does depend on how much time you play with each other, because otherwise you're not going to know what someone's strong suit is, what their weaknesses are. And at the end of the day, the way that you're going to win is by feeding into what they're good at and what they're bad at, because you don't want to put them in a scenario where their weakness is going to be exploited. You definitely just want to encourage their strengths.
Right. Knowing that someone's favorite color is red is not going to tell you that they're going to cut into the box at this moment.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Well, I think it's really interesting. One of the things that Mike mentioned is that, you're from a large family. I know this, obviously, because I'm part of that large family. But for our viewers, they don't know that. They wouldn't have known if Mike didn't mention it. But I think that there's something that you and I have kind of learned. There's an aspect of being from a large family, particularly having a lot of brothers, with competitiveness that gives you this like really big drive to always want to be the best that you can possibly be. I know you're incredibly competitive. What do you think about your competitive aspect of your life kind of drives how you view sports, and maybe other stuff as well?
Yeah, I would definitely say my brothers, especially like being the younger of the three kind of athletes that kind of fall, like you, Jack, and I. That's another older brother. We were the major kind of athletes of the family. Obviously, like older sister wasn't doing too much sports. Oldest brother was too musically talented to
Shots
care.
fired.
Yeah.
So I would say that it kind of taught me, one, that if I'm not going to give it my all, I'm not going to be able to win, because you guys always had like a physical advantage on me just from being older. And I think what that really inspired me to do was, regardless of the outcome, I had to go 100%, regardless of what it was. And I had to be self-improving. So I think that competitively, I'm not only, it's not only a sports thing, it really is like a life thing. Everything that I do, I try and do it to the absolute best of my ability, just because I know that if I don't, there's other people who are, and other people who are more gifted than me. And if I'm not going to go 100%, I'm going to get passed up. And obviously, like, you know, in the game of life, I'm too competitive to want to be passed up.
One of the things I was going to include you on this because I think this is a good point, because you and I have talked about this before in our podcast, where we've talked about competitiveness, especially in the context of having brothers. And when you and I were talking about it, we talked about it in the aspect of how you have a brother and you become competitive not necessarily to become better than your brother, but you become competitive to lift your brother up with you, right? Like you attain the same type of standards. And I think that this is something that is really lost in today's society when they view competitiveness is this very lonesome, alone thing where you're trying to just be better than everyone else. But I think something that you just kind of touched on there was like we become competitive because there's an ultimate good that we're seeking, and we want everyone to get there at the same time. Like we're trying to lift the standards to get to that ultimate goodness.
Yeah, I mean, competitiveness, when you're playing any sport, you want to be the best you possibly can. And in life, you want to be the best you possibly can. But it's really easy to be selfish. And so if David's playing soccer, we use soccer as an analogy. He's running in, and he wants to shoot a goal, and he could probably make it if he got lucky with it. But he can pass it to his open teammate.
And they've got the open goal.
Exactly. So it's being selfless when you're playing with a team. Teamwork. That's why they call it.
I will mention I did have one game where I got 6 assists. So obviously I'm a very selfless person.
The most selfless person you will ever meet on the internet.
No, that's a joke.
And yes, I mean, sports and working as a team is super important into anyone's development when they go up through high school. That's why I always encourage everyone to play as many sports as you possibly can. You get to learn people. You get to learn who you are. I wrestled when I was young, and that taught me how to be on my own and fight for myself. It's not easy. You're just by yourself. You have your coaches a little bit, and you have to listen. It's hard work. It really is. And
I was just gonna add one more comment. Like one of the biggest things I think that I learned from sports is adherence. You don't really realize it, but adherence is a huge skill that you need to kind of obtain almost. And sports gives that to you. You have to adhere to some sort of rules in life. And especially nowadays where rule bending is kind of like the main vibe and trend and everything that goes on, you have to realize that there is an ultimate purpose behind things, and there's an ultimate rule book that kind of guides everything, right? And I think sports is one of the things that can really help you understand that idea.
And I think one more thing, just to tag on to adherence, that ultimately, when you tie that into things, that also leads into your ability to gain accountability. Like, I know that when I played basketball, I had a coach who every time we made a mistake on the court said, clap your hands, And if you do something good, clap twice. So you give yourself accountability. You remind yourself of the things that you're doing wrong. And if someone brings them up, well, you already know that it's there, so you know that they're right, and you can then learn from what they have to say. I think that kind of speaks levels to the types of criticism that people are able to take on and grow from, because ultimately, at the end of the day, if you can't be accountable, you're not going to be able to grow.
100%, and sports does teach you a lot of that. But most of it comes from your early life. It comes from your parents, your family, and we talked a little bit about you're a middle child. You grew up with a lot of examples. You got to see what was right, what was wrong, where people got in trouble, where they didn't get in trouble. And you come from a very, very awesome Catholic family. So those values really should show through in who you are, help you with sports. What were some struggles, or how did you form yourself being that middle child? I know my little brother is a middle child, and he just felt like left behind at times. He was forgotten about. Even people mention that we'll talk about our family and forget about him, just not meaning to. How did that affect you growing up? How did that change your mindset?
Ooh, yeah. I mean, that's that's a layered question, man.
We're getting into it now.
I think it actually did play a really big part in a lot of the things that I kind of grew to do. You know, like obviously I had stellar examples in my early childhood, like stellar examples of just solid people, you know, like people who are strong in their faith, strong in their beliefs, did the right thing, didn't really stray from the flock. But like ultimately, I don't know if I necessarily like if that was something that was like a really big tick for me, because I think being the middle child, I wanted to be independent. Like I wanted to be my own person. I wanted to be able to do the things that I wanted to do, because I think so much like in my early childhood, you have to go along with the plans of everybody else that never really, not necessarily not having my say. Like I definitely got to share my opinion, but it wasn't really like necessarily heard a lot of the time. And I think that might not even be true. Like it probably could have been heard, but maybe I was just like deaf to it, blind to it. And so I wanted to be independent. I wanted to do my own thing. I wanted to break rules, all kinds of random stuff, you know? So I would say that being a middle child made me want to be more of myself and less like the people around me to a degree.
You mentioned break rules. Can you elaborate more on that?
Yeah, you know, like I definitely, my parents were very strict on certain things like technology, relationships, the types of like media we would consume, whether that was like video games, types of TV that we would watch, the people who we would hang out with, you know, they wanted to know our friends. And ultimately it's all for good reason. Like looking back on the whole grand scheme of things, they were obviously just trying to protect their little boy from like a damaged world. But I didn't care. So we weren't like allowed to have cell phones. Definitely weren't allowed to have smartphones. You know, I literally, I remember I was 14 years old and I had probably made like a couple $100 reffing soccer games, and I took like probably $60 and I literally walked to Walgreens and I bought like a trap phone. And that was literally that was just so that I could, because I had a Snapchat account that I had created on the phone that Ben had that I would have access to sometimes. And so I wanted to be on social media. I wanted to talk to, I think that part of me I wanted to keep in contact with my friends in Virginia, and social media was kind of like growing at that point. It was still relatively young. Like Snapchat was young, Instagram was young. They were probably only like Snapchat was maybe a year and a half old. And oh, sorry. I got a phone
Oh no!
Speaking of phones and social media, it's her parents calling.
Almost just broke your phone.
So I wanted to be on social media just so that I could stay connected with the people back home. But ultimately, that kind of just led me to feed into my vices, right? So, like, I was a young kid, and I don't know if I was necessarily, like, the most handsome or the most athletic or the tallest, but I was definitely very confident in myself, like, egotistical to a point. And so I literally, wanting to be on social media and connecting with my friends ultimately just led to me trying to talk to as many girls as I possibly could at like an early age. And that kind of led to like almost like an infatuation with women, and ultimately led to like an objectification of women. So it became less about like getting to know a girl and more so about being like, can I get this girl to have feelings for me?
Right.
Can I find a way to, you know, ultimately like bed this woman, so to speak, like things like that. And from there, you know, one sin led to another, and that was kind of like, I just became like, you know, I wanted to try everything. So like, I remember 8th grade, one of my friends had a Juul, and I was like, I want to try that. And so that was kind of like the beginning of just wanting to explore and try as many new things as possible, regardless of whether or not I had like an actual carnal knowledge of whether or not they were wrong. Like, I didn't care. I just wanted to try different things.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of us have been there, where especially coming from a Catholic homeschooled house where people would say sheltered. The second you get a little bit of freedom, you're like, I'm the smartest person in the world. I know best. I can have this one hit of this jewel like everyone else is doing. I'll be fine. And then it turns into, no, I can buy a jewel. I'll be fine. And then you're buying packs a day. It's a slippery slope.
That almost becomes like a you just want to do it because you want to prove that you have the ability to do it.
That's why I started drinking.
Yeah, I think we talked about this as well, where when we were just talking about the nature of the internet, is that the internet is like it draws people in, and it's kind of like one big crowd. Like, the internet is one big crowd of peer pressure that will constantly drive you to do anything. You can know about anything just by using the internet to a certain extent, obviously. And you'll see different things that happen on the internet, and you're like, man, like, I want to have a piece of that. I want to be able to try that, like drinking, juuling,
Partying.
Partying, like just general status, like money and stuff like that. You see all of that on the internet, and it really makes you fall into this type of like peer pressure crowd where you don't want to be outside of the crowd. And I think, especially coming from a homeschool background, there's like an inherent desire to always want to be part of the crowd, because from the minute that you kind of start to become aware of different things,
you're good, yeah.
You think that you're outside of the crowd because you're homeschooled, right? So
would you say we get so focused on the cheese we forget about the trap?
That's gonna be a sick clip, bro. That's gonna be a sick clip. I already pictured my head. No, let's keep it in. No, 100%. You said you want to be part of the crowd.
Mm-hmm.
You see everyone else doing it. The internet promotes drinking, partying, being promiscuous, and you think it's normal. So you're just like, oh, I can do it too. I want to be part of everybody else. I don't want to be weird. I don't want to be an outsider, but we're called to be different.
Yeah, there's like almost like because you're homeschooled and people already have this preconceived notion of what you're going to be like. You do everything you possibly can to destroy that notion and make it seem as much as possible that you're like everyone else.
Yeah.
Even though deep down you're a weirdo, you know.
100%.
Yeah. That was a huge thing, you know, like when I told people that when I would introduce myself to people, like I would say by the time I was 15, I didn't tell people I was homeschooled. People would ask me, they'd be like, where you go to school? And I'd say, oh, I play soccer at Firestone.
Yeah.
So, like, you know, I didn't go to Firestone, but I wasn't gonna tell them that I was homeschooled. So I literally would just tell them a white lie.
But you didn't lie, yeah.
Yeah, I would just give them zero information on the question that they asked. It's like the red herring, you know, like, oh, you like Blue Jays? Here's a red herring.
Yeah. What I used to, like, the biggest compliment I would get is like, wait, no, there's no way you're homeschooled. That meant like, yes,
got that all the time.
That was the best compliment I could ever get.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you're saying that I'm not a weirdo?
Yeah, it's like, yeah.
Man, you're the best.
I think
we can all sometimes too.
We can all agree. I remember saying this when we were all going through it, when we were all homeschooled. Everyone could always tell that there was a difference between being homeschooled and being a homeschooler, right? You knew who the homeschoolers were, but you didn't know whether or not someone was homeschooled.
Do you want to explain to the people, or do you want me to explain to the people?
You can explain
that difference.
Explain that difference.
Alrighty. I don't mean to offend anybody, but there is a massive difference between being a homeschooler and being homeschooled. We were homeschooled. You really couldn't pick us out from a crowd. We're very normal.
Yeah.
From looking at it.
Very outgoing, social.
We can social. That's the biggest thing that you can talk to people. Like,
oh,
wow,
yeah.
Well, you have friends. Being a homeschooler, those are the stereotypical cargo shorts, socks with sandals.
Okay, wait a second. I had cargo shorts.
Rec specs.
I was a
specs when not playing
up
sports.
until probably like 10 years old. Once I started actually playing sports and I was hanging around with normal kids, that's when I stopped wearing my cargo pants and my socks with sandals. I had those Keen sandals with a huge toe. You know what I'm talking about? You could go in those anywhere, and you felt fine.
You wore Reeboks in 2008.
I had the Shaquille O'Neal basketball shoes.
The and ones.
Yeah, I had those too. Oh my
I
God.
told the kid they were Jordans because I didn't know the difference.
Dude, okay, my mom messed up so many phrases for me. Like, so when I went to school, like public school again, for like sports, sitting in like the cafeteria, whatever, waiting for the bus, I went in my bag to get a fruit snack. I didn't call them fruit snacks. I called them Snicky snacks.
No.
Because I thought that was what they were called. And they looked at me like,
What?
What? A Snicky snack? What are you talking about? And I'm like, yeah, it's Snicky snacks. Thanks, Mom. It was absolutely nuts. And there's many other ones. Don't want to get into it too much. There's so many phrases that we still mess up all the time. But
Are you sure that doesn't have anything to do with like you on a personal level?
no, definitely not. My mom thinks it's funny. we have conversations about it.
That's the beautiful thing about having kids, dude. You can just program into them whatever the heck you want.
My buddy Ben Corson, when I would help babysit his kid, I would just point at other like objects like the window. I'm like, door. And then the door, I'd point window. Just mix up certain little things.
We had a lot of obviously younger siblings, and we had one in particular when she was a little baby. She would say yes to everything. Just yes. And this was a problem that she really had up until the point that she was probably like, I would say even like 5. She would just always say yes no matter what. And that was sort of like, we would just always tell her, no, you don't say no. You don't say no. Don't say no. Right? And so she, as a result, would always say yes no matter what.
I don't know which sibling this is.
I don't want to say it on air, but I'll tell you.
It was
off
actually David.
It was David.
We had our neighbor kid who was.
No, I was a crybaby.
Were you?
Oh yeah, very emotional child.
Middle child, we had this neighbor that actually no, it wasn't. It was our middle child in our family that we told him that thumbs up was actually the finger in the middle. So we got him in trouble. He'd go, "Hey, Mom." Yeah.
I did that with my older brother one time where I was at my friend's house on a play date, and he was a little bit less, we'll say, disciplined than I was as a kid, and he taught me the F word. And I remember going home, I think I was probably 7 or 8 years old, and I went up to my older brother. I said, "Hey, what does mean?"
Oh my God.
And he was like, "Don't say that in front of Mom." He was like, didn't even tell me what it meant. He was just, "Don't say that in front of Mom."
At least he was a G and didn't say that meant like that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And at the
Yeah.
time, I was smart enough to recognize it was like the context in which the word was said. When I was younger, I was like, this is probably not a very good word. I'm not going to ask Mom what this means. Let me go ask my brother.
Man, I remember like being 10 years old and me and one of my buddies, we would go to this park while like my older siblings were at like a religion class, and we would go to this creek and we would just walk as far away from the park down the creek as we could, and we would just say every single swear word we knew.
I used to do plays when I was younger. I was in 8th grade. I didn't know any curse words.
Yeah.
None. But the plays were with normal kids.
Yeah.
And during our lunch break, we'd go in like a corner room, and they would teach me swear words and how to use them. Like literally had like classes on how to curse. Like this is just stuff people just don't understand. I don't think I've ever told anybody that. It's like a memory like you just pushed to.
The confession comes out now. I think since we're on the topic of kind of like bad words and stuff like that and vices in general, we touched on this a little bit with just how you had your struggles, and I think a lot of people share in those types of similar struggles. You're not the same person now.
Oh no.
How would you say that you kind of came back and got rid of a lot of those problems that you had in your life?
Yeah, so I earlier I mentioned accountability. So accountability is a massive part of this. You have to, a lot of people, are willing to confront the people around them. Everyone is willing to tell their friend that their fly's down, or tell their friend that he needs to wash his dishes better, or like, dude, your shirt's stupid. Everyone is willing to confront the people around them, right? But no one wants to take a step back and look at the man in the mirror. So the very first thing that you want to do if you want to overcome your personal battles is to take a step back and look at yourself from behind, like just look at yourself from who you've been and who you want to be and say, okay, well, I can recognize this is problematic. I can recognize this is problematic. And when you start noticing all of the little things, you start realizing that like your entire life operates on like a systematic level, right? So you can start breaking down like, oh, I follow this person on social media and it leads me to this vice. Oh, I hang out with this person and it leads me to this vice. I spend a lot of time in a group setting and maybe that leads to me drinking and partying. So you start noticing all the little things, and that's when you're like, okay, now, day by day, I'm going to correct little actions. So doing minor things like making your bed, rinsing out your coffee mug when you're done using it, cleaning your silverware, cleaning your dishes and putting them away. When you start doing little things right, that is kind of like how you can break yourself out of a system of bad habits. Because bad habits, again, it's systematic. So if the minor things that I do, I can't do those right, then how am I going to overcome something big? So a massive part of it is self-accountability. Don't confront anyone until you've confronted yourself. You've basically come face to face with your demons and you've told them, I'm not going to listen to you anymore. I am my own person created in the image and likeness of God, and I'm going to move forward in that direction. So that's like a major part of it, For me, the kind of like the turning point was like a year ago, right around Thanksgiving. Like everyone thinks like, what are we thankful for at Thanksgiving? And so like a huge thing for me was like, okay, I'm thankful for my car, I'm thankful for my job, and I'm thankful for my family. And then I kind of thought about that, and I was like, wow, I grew up in a very like Christian household, very Catholic household, and I'm not thankful for my faith. I'm not thankful for my God. I'm not thankful for any of that stuff. And so I was like, okay, well, that's a problem. So then I took a step back and I was like, okay, where are all of these little things going wrong? And how can I confront the little things so that I can start doing big things correctly?
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
I don't think I could have put it any better.
No, it takes a lot of like accountability, like you said, to realize that you're doing something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And the person you lie to most is yourself.
Yeah.
We've talked about this in the character podcast. It's really easy to go, no, I'll be fine. I can do this one time. I'm strong enough. You're not strong enough. You need help from your brothers. You need help from your faith, God, your guardian angels, all of that.
Oh yeah.
All your patron saints. We're in a world where we're constantly under attack. Our faith, our values, our morals are being attacked every single day, and it's so easy to fall victim to it. And it's so easy to, when you're trying to get better and you fall down, to not get up, to just go, oh, this world's too hard. I'm just not meant to do this. I'm always going to be addicted to a certain kind of website and doing a certain kind of act. I'm always going to be someone who drinks until they blacks out. I'm always going to be doing illicit whatever things. I don't want to get demonetized. It's really easy to fall into that.
It's legal in our state now.
Oh, that's just because it's
Terrible.
legal doesn't mean it's right. And I'm so proud of. I've known you for a little while now. I've known you for 7 years now.
Yeah.
I've watched you go from, I think you're like 14 to where you are now, and it's beautiful to see.
Didn't want to do the math there.
Thank you.
And I've watched you go through. I remember when you first started with the vaping with nicotine, drinking, partying. When you moved out your house to your friend's house, and to see who you are now, it's awesome. And I'm always gonna be super hard on you. I've always been super hard on you because I see a lot of myself in you, and I want you to succeed. I want everyone around me to be the best they possibly can. Because if you're the best you can, you're gonna push me, and we're gonna continue to move forward.
Again, just it's part like being as I mentioned, like even with the sports, like being a part of the machine, and the only way that you can be a part of the machine is by being your best possible version of yourself.
Exactly.
100%.
Competition, there's two sides, and who are you really competing against? competing against things that are bad. You don't compete against your fellow human beings because they're not bad, right? There is an enemy underneath all of it. And so when you're competing against that worst side, that worst aspect of every human being in order to get rid of it, right? Trying to show people through competition, through just friendship, through camaraderie, that we can all be better people. And that's what we're always trying to do. We just always want to become better. And I think that we're probably going to leave the podcast off around here. It's been a really, really good discussion. I'm glad that we had David on. We'll definitely get him on again. I think that was pretty excellent.
Yeah, we're going to see David on again at some point as we continue to grow. We're going to see him with 2 arms.
Definitely within 5 years.
I do have I feel like there's one more point that I feel like I could add to what we were talking about that would be kind of beneficial.
Close it out.
Go for it. Close it out.
A massive, I would say that like a really big thing that I had to overcome to get through my vices was anger, right? Being like an angry person, right? So I've always been passionate, but I've also always been angry. And one of the things that I realized that comes with anger is that when you are an angry person, when you lash out at other people, it typically has nothing to do with the people that you lash out at. It always is almost something personal. So like someone says something and you don't like it, it's not because you don't like the fact that they said it, it's because you hate the fact that they're right. So I think that when you take that anger and you realize that it's anger at the injustice you're doing to yourself, you can use that as a weapon in your process of self-improvement. And I think that that is a massive, massive, massive part of the accountability, is knowing how to channel the anger that you feel at the things that people say.
100%. Absolutely beautiful. This has been fantastic. I love doing this. This is amazing.
It's been good. Hey.
I appreciate it. So this is podcast 15. If you watched all the way through this, please like and subscribe.
Oh yeah, we meant to say that at the beginning, but it's all right.
I'll put up some little
Yeah.
Like and subscribe.
Throw a little pop-up ad in there.
Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. This has been fantastic. David, thank you for taking the time out of your day to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
This is Just Like You and Me with Ben and Mike, and we're out.